KCDF podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
Welcome to another episode of our Conversations on African Philanthropy with me, Kiganjo. I'm happy to be joined by Catherine Kiganjo from the Kenya Community Development Foundation based in Nairobi. Catherine, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you so much. We are here at the margins of the East Africa Philanthropy Network, a network that you belong to as an institution. We have seen it grow in leaps and bounds, and the last 2 days have really been phenomenal in terms of just seeing the vibrancy of the sector. As a member of the network, what are your thoughts in terms of what you have seen so far over the last couple of years? This is the 8th annual conference of the network.
And in this particular convenings, I think I've seen growth. Growth in terms of size of the number of organizations that are participating. I think I've seen excitement in people wanting to be part of this network. And also just listening into the conversations, I can see the relevance in terms of what's going on in the sector, and particularly on issues that are very relevant, and also bringing on the youth. Because it's always said that how do we get the youth involved? And I've really seen an active youth presence in this particular meeting, yes.
Yeah, and then of course, when we talk about institutional memory, we have an idea of what we are talking about, but I don't really think most of us grasp the notion of institutional memory. In your case, you have been with the institution for 26 years. You have been through all the directors present and those that have left. Is it 3 or 4?
We're on the third executive director,
yes.
Executive
director, yeah. So let's talk about, firstly, of all the people that I've spoken to, they keep saying, you must speak to Catherine. And in fact, I did speak to you, but it was in a team meeting when I came to visit KCDF sometime this year. But I just want us to use this opportunity just to trace it back to the beginnings. When you joined KCDF, can you paint the picture for us? What was there?
Oh, yes, I'm sure this can be read in a book, but I think I'll just say that the very first time I joined KCDF, it was at the beginning, because this was an idea. And so finally, there was need to begin to take action and really put this idea into practice. So I went for an interview. For the first time, I had applied a job in the newspaper. And I was actually interviewed. It was quite surprising that you can apply for a job and then you get shortlisted and you're interviewed. So I was interviewed for the job. And because this was an organization that was starting, they were really looking for administrative support. So I applied for the job and I was interviewed and I was selected as a final candidate. And so that was really exciting and I was ready to go. So the first time, so I was asked, so where's the office? And I was told there's no physical office. The office is still being prepared. And I was like, oops. So you left a job to start this organization where there's no even physical office. Yeah. And so we started from really humble beginning because we just were hosted. We were hosted by the Ford Foundation and the Aga Khan. So we were moving between the Ford Foundation and the Aga Khan Foundation office as we were starting to set up the office where we were eventually going to be. So then we moved into this space in office space in Pangani, which was being renovated. So the first time I went there, I didn't really know where it was. Yeah. So you reach there and there's this place which is quite not the upmarket place in town. It's more of a really informal area. So I tried to ask, does anyone know where this office is? And nobody seemed to know. The best thing they said is, that office, there looks like some work is going on there. That may be a computer center, but maybe it could be the office. So I sort of was hanging around to see, because then I called the then programs director, who was then to be the first executive director, and she said, "Oh, I'm coming, I'll be there in a few." So then I saw her drive to the gate. And so I said, obviously this is the office. So then I went to her, and then we got into the office. And I mean, it was space that was being redone, renovated. And we were just part of that first, buying desks, recruiting staff, just believing that this is something good and it's going somewhere. So that was actually the beginning. And just coming from an established organization to just this exciting idea. And I think for me that was really the beginning.
So at that time, what position had you applied for?
I was an admin officer, administration officer, yes.
Okay. And then the programs director who became the CEO, we're talking about Monica
Mutuku, yes. She was the first programs director, because at that point we were a project of the Aga Khan Foundation. And more so was because there was need to work under an organization to sort of build credibility for the organization. And yes, so that went on up to 2001. Before then we were registered as an organization.
Right.
Yes.
Great. And then of course you settle in, but then you assume different positions. So in the last 26 years, can we go through each of the positions that you have held in the organization?
Yeah, I think one needs to appreciate that as a small organization, you have to be willing to be many things. And as an admin assistant in a growing organization, I had other skills, and I still continue to grow other skills to help me engage in other roles. So I was an admin assistant. I started also playing the support role for governance, managing the board, and then also supporting the role of the human resource. So after Monica Mutuku and I, we began to recruit staff because we needed a lead of programs, a head of finance, communication. So the organization continued to grow in just small baby steps. And then, of course, we had to start now, of course, trying to find programs, how we're going to engage. Because we were a young organization, there was need to build credibility. So in building credibility, it meant that we needed to start doing some program work. So we had a program staff who then we started now going out into the communities, finding programs to do, supporting communities through the different processes that the organization was engaging with. So it was a grant-making process. And then from, in terms of grant making, ensuring the processes were participatory, engaging with the communities, working with external support because the staffing was thin, so working maybe with consultants, especially in trying to start community-driven processes. And then we went to the grassroots. The very first time you go to a community, there's no road, you're struggling to get there. So this was a collective process because it did not only involve the program team, but the whole team, because we were a very small team. So we would all really participate, engage, and go out. So you found that you really had to play different roles depending on the time and what needed to be done. So I then became, because I doubled in, then I became a program manager, I became an admin manager, and then grew into supporting more programs. So programs came on, and then I also now became a program officer. Yeah. So, but because we were still young, I still continued to do roles supporting the governance, meaning the board, still supporting the HR function, and then we started including more staff. So some of the roles like admin were taken up by other staff and logistics. But I mean, I've still continued in terms of time for quite a while, up to around, I think, most recent. This was in 2022, where my role still continued. I still continued to really double up for many things, but appreciating that it's really the passion of the work more than looking at the burden of the work that really kept me going. So, and I think also just the mindset that every opportunity was an opportunity to grow. And so really did find I continued to take on more. But also, like you said, institution memory, because I was there from the beginning, I really did continue to support a lot of the issues, especially on governance, on the personnel, supported as the personnel grew, came and left. So I can actually say that we've nurtured many staff who've come through. And yes, too. So still last year, 2022, I then now took on a different role so that we could begin to ensure we had more people in terms of them knowing what happens in KCDF. So now we have a person who's a corporate affairs and admin manager who's taken up the role of governance, the role of HR and admin. So that now is leaving me now more to support the organization development so that we can continue to begin to see community foundations. From our experience, how are we supporting the growth of our community foundations? So now my current role is I'm a team leader for organization development and education.
Yeah. So for record's sake, are we right to say you were the second employee of the organization?
Yes, I am 002. Yes,
staff number 002.
Yes, staff number 002, and I'm probably the only staff left from the very start.
Yeah, from the beginning,
yes, a lot of the staff now are relatively new, but we still have a few staff who've been there for a while. Yes, and it's been an amazing journey, and I think I've really enjoyed. I've grown in the organization. And also maybe just to say that KCDF being a learning organization, we've been really supportive of staff to start to grow even on their careers from KCDF. Some came in as interns, grew to managers, maybe left the organization. Some started as interns, left and came back again to serve in the organization. And it's really been amazing. Yeah.
And of course, one thing that I'm really keen to talk to you about is, serving under different leaders. Leaders have different leadership styles, they have different interests, they have different issues that they want to achieve during the time of their tenure. And so starting with Monica, how was it working under Monica? What were the issues that she cared about? And then we go on to Janet and then now to Grace.
Okay, I guess for Monica, because she was the first executive director, for me it was a learning period of learning, because I was really young, and maybe at that point in time, it was also my first time to work in the civil society sector. And she was really passionate about the work of Community Foundation. I mean, you could see the passion even when she's engaging. She was sort of fearless. Really was so committed to this, because she was part of the founders in this conversation about building a Kenya Community Development Foundation. So, so to the point at which she had to leave because it was basically because retirement, and so then we move on to the next ED. So I think for me it was a question of adopting to the new change, and a different leadership style. And for me, I felt that I continued to have a learning mindset and adapting to the new situation. And again, the question was, can KCDF survive beyond the founder? And for me, that was interesting. And just being determined to see how will this work. So when Janet Maweo came in, who was the second executive director, she came with a different leadership style, which, okay, for me wasn't as shaking. It was for me to adapt. And I found also her being very supportive of the team. She threw you up in the deep end, so it was for you to swim, which was really good for growth. And we continue to really support growth of new employees from internship, space to grow. It was, I think most of the time we felt like it's an open book or a canvas. I mean, because these were roles that were emerging, and so you had the opportunity to grow, to paint what you wanted this role to look like. Of course, with knowing what your deliverables were, and so we found that very exciting. And so we've gone through that process, and inevitably, again, Janet did serve for 17 years, and then she had to leave, of course, because of retirement age at the organization. And then Grace came in 2021. And so with Grace, it's also a new leadership, again adopting and being supportive of her settling in, having had an ED who had been there for 17 years, and so it was really how do we support her settle in, and it's really been another journey, and I think we continue to grow, and I think it's more of just seeing that KCDF can actually survive through transitions has been very very interesting. I think having a really supportive board, very involved board, and very easy to work with board. So I think that has really made things actually very easy. Yes.
So earlier in the plenary, I talked about how at times collaborations become stronger because of tensions and contradictions. And somebody mentioned to me at break time and said, you know, the reason why KCDF actually has come out stronger is that in the beginnings, for example, there were two people that one was from the donor side and the other was Monica, but they were always, you know, having this contentious relationship, but that's what made them actually build the institution that it has become. Since you were there from the beginning, do you relate to what this person was talking about, that, you know, there was actually this relationship where it wasn't really like a conflict, but the relationship was, I think it's that of trying to get where we're supposed to be, but we have to really almost work in, at times it could look as if it's a contradiction, or it could be a tension, but basically it's the passion that each of them had.
Yes. That I do remember very well. I think one needs to appreciate is context. And yes, there's what whoever wants to fund you can see what it needs to look like, but then there's that applying it to your own context. So I think what one is to say that Monica was very passionate, and it was very clear that a community foundation in Kenya is different from a community foundation in the US. So they're just trying to get that clear understanding that we need to contextualize this great idea to our own idea. How do you make it local? How do you make it work for us? And so I think that is where one would say the conflict would be, but where the rift, but it's really trying to bring the other person on board to understand that we need to make this a local, we need to localize it, we need to make it apply for us. And that's, I think that's where I really saw, and that's why I say Monica was very passionate about, because they were in the very initial conversations of what this that we are building should look like. And so, and it was, there was even an opportunity for a couple of the directors to go to the US and see at the East Tennessee Community Foundation and see what a community foundation looked like. But then now when you came to Kenya, this was a national community foundation. So the question is, how then do you make it work in the Kenyan context? And so that is where the whole conversation would go to then create rift. But then eventually it was accepted that we need to localize this, we need to make it work for us. And so that clearly then became the point of convergence. Yes.
And so if we were to take on a historical detour now, and you want to just go back in history, what would be the key moments that you would say these have been the different key moments or turning points in the life of KCDF?
I think I would say that the KCDF in the very beginning, as a project of a well-established organization, there was such desire to be independent. And I think we used to laugh and say it's like a teenager who just wants freedom. They don't care what this freedom will be like. We will know about the freedom as we go along. So the organization, Aga Khan Foundation, was gracious enough to say, okay, teenager, you want freedom? I'll give you freedom. So they actually supported the process of registration. And then we were, all the ducks in a row, we were now let to be on our own. So that was a period of really, you would say, significance, because then at that point in time also, we had already started building a relationship with communities. So at that point, then there was the interest in us beginning to push the sustainability side of KCDF. So about building the endowment, beginning to get communities on board to appreciate and understand what endowments were, beginning to get organizations to build endowments. And then, of course, we had significant support over a period of time to build the institution. And I think that was very important, because having that opportunity to have support building the organization, if you have that kind of support, helps you to really put your structures in place. Then, of course, it gets to a point where whoever funder is supporting you to do that. The Ford Foundation got to this time when they had to say this is now the closing grant, and then but we survived beyond that period, and then continuing to grow partnerships with other organizations and other funders. But one of the other things is that, so yes, we managed actually to survive that process. Then continuing to have highs and lows of funding and being able to continue to grow your support. But one thing I remember the board has always been very concerned about is not having a significant organization or funder taking the highest percentage of support, because at the point at which the funding comes to an end, you would then have a problem. But then pushing local philanthropy, trying to start to grow and engage with private sector engagement within the country, and having to grow partnerships and other opportunities locally, and beginning to have yourself known within the local philanthropy and partnerships with private sector, which has really been significant, and we have grown that part very well. And just appreciating that you actually can raise resources locally, and also trying to get this also with the local organizations. What are those things that we can do more for people to realize that you actually can get funding locally, and that has really been part of the transformation.
And from a programming point of view, obviously when you start, there's not many programs that you focus on. Do you want to take us through the evolution of the programming, of KCDF from the beginning to where we are? But obviously you can't talk about everything, but those key programs that over time have really grown.
Okay, so at the beginning when KCDF was set up, I think there was just that issue of who are you? No, we didn't have credibility. So the issue is, how do you grow credibility? And by starting to work within the communities. So the first programs that we did were really programs, grant making for programs to focus on development, but it was not so restrictive on what it was, going to the community and them determining what that they really wanted to do, and then supporting them through those processes, ensuring that it's participatory, they're engaged. And so we had, I think, about 5 grants. That's where we started, and supported them over a period of time. And then after that, we then now began to attract other funders. We did education programs. We had early childhood development programs. We had youth programs. So the KCDF has really not focused on taking a specific area. Because we are a community foundation, we actually get work on grants and programs that are working on solving or addressing community issues. And so that's why you'll find we are dealing with youth issues, we are dealing with children education programs, we are dealing with environment, we are dealing with livelihoods. And so our programs tend to work on really focusing on solving those, supporting communities to solve those issues. So that's what have been our programs. That's what we've focused on.
And that's a good way for us to then talk about the different communities that we have worked with over the 26-year period. The last time I spoke to you, I think you had about 26 or 27 organizations from communities that have been working with you, and they've all developed their own endowments. And I think you said the oldest of them could be like has been working with you for a period of about 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe let's talk about that. I mean, what really led you as an institution to think about a model that says we are going to have our own endowment, but that endowment must also have participation from communities?
Okay, so KCDF received a challenge grant, and this was really towards building sustainability for the organization. So the question was, as you build your own sustainability as an organization, KCDF was very passionate about beginning to work with communities, organizations, to talk about sustainability. So the approach here was, can you challenge communities or organizations to raise money so that they can be able to get a matching grant, then they can set up an endowment. Because this was also trying to have a mindset change of money must come from out. So what happened was that the organizations, first of all, talking about an endowment, it had never been had in this region in the early 90s. So it was really a difficult conversation. And remember, people were always suspicious. It was a time when people were suspicious of civil society organizations. There was a trust issue, and even just having that conversation. So you're telling people, we were challenging you to raise money. We will match it a shilling for a shilling.
Yeah.
And you're like, who does that?
Yeah.
So a few organizations heard about it. And because these were community organizations that were set up at the community, and they said, okay, so we'll go raise the money. And they actually went and raised money, and then came, and then the money they had raised was matched. They set up, so of course the condition was that they had to set up the endowment at KCDF. And then through the process, we have about 29 organizations, KCDF included, so 28, that have set up endowments at KCDF. Almost 3/4 of those have had their grants matched. Their money that they raised was matched. And they actually today, most of those organizations are able to draw a grant every year from their endowment to do community development work, to serve their community through those grants. So it's really been an amazing journey. And that even during COVID, KCDF and also these organizations were able to get support through their endowments to be able to keep our offices open, to keep the staff.
Yeah.
And so that has been a really interesting phase of.
Yeah. The last time I spoke to you and your colleagues, we were talking about the idea that these communities, the way they've grown and the way they've participated and the issues that they deal with could easily be considered as community foundations. Mm-hmm. So even though KCDF is a national community foundation, these could also be seen and viewed and even conceptualized as community foundations. And so in a way, KCDF can be really has contributed to the birth and growth of more than 20 community foundations or community foundations like institutions. Mm-hmm. How far have you gone with that thinking?
We are now, that's actually been an area of focus. We now currently have a challenge or a support to grow community foundations. We now reached 24 organizations that we have engaged, and now we are in the process of creating a movement of community foundations. So some of the organizations that build endowments at KCDF are also the organizations that have been part of this process, because they really are grassroots driven. They are raising this money from their own communities. The assets are actually coming out in terms of them being able to then get their grant to serve the community. So that is actually one of the things that KCDF has desired for so long to do, and now we really are happy that we are doing that. So we are now at about 24 organizations that we've already been able to get into this, but we now want to create the momentum and the movement of community foundations. that's what we are doing now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think finally, I mean, this is one of our biggest area of interest. So speaking to everyone, including Janet, and when I came to KCDF, I was really blown away by the kind of institutional memory that lies with you when it comes to the sustainability arm of the organization. So KCDF is really a fascinating entity in terms of, you know, the foundation, but the other parts that have been created over the times. And those were really set up because you wanted to address this issue of sustainability. Maybe take us through, you know, the mechanics and some of the key things that non-profits must think about, but using KCDF as an example when they think about building their own sustainability. You have had such a complex but elaborate way of doing things, and everyone says the only person who knows this is Catherine. Even when I came to your organization, initially you were not in the meeting. They had to say, this one we don't know, please let's look for Catherine. So Catherine, here you are. Even Janet says, ask Catherine.
Yeah, why I'm breathing a sigh is that it's a process.
Yeah.
I think one has to be intentional, especially in building structures and ensuring you secure those structures in a way that there's never a runaway. Maybe to say that the foundation is registered as a company limited by guarantee. So it's the development arm of the organization. Now, because the foundation has committed to its sustainability, it then has a trust. And so the trust is the arm that is the custodian of the foundation's assets. So its role is custody and growth. So so they make sure that the investment, the assets are invested well, they are secured, and they continue to grow. So what the trust has then done is that because they need an arm that, or a mechanism that would focus on the growth of the assets, then the trust has set up a limited company, which basically means it will be responsible for supervising and growing the funds through the different structures that they exist. So they manage the fund manager who manages the endowment, they manage the property manager who manages the house, and there's land, so that is real estate, and then and then you're also having other investments. So you need an organization that will focus, and so this is being managed through ADAPO, which is now the limited company, which has directors who supervise and ensure that that is happening. But I think what is important is ensuring that you put in structures and the proper mechanism and legal framework to ensure that you're looking at the future. You're looking at 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from today. Have there mechanisms that have been put so that these organizations can survive? And why do they exist? They exist to serve the foundation. So that looking 50 years, 75 years, 100 years from today, that the resources that are there to serve the custody of the trust will be available to do the work that the foundation wants to continue doing. And that's why the structures are there. Yeah. Again, it's work in progress. We continue to tweak here and there to make sure that the governance structures and everything is in place. But it's work in progress. You have to be intentional.
Yeah, and one would say, so what are the instruments that one needs to put in place in order to create relations between the different structures? So for example, between the foundation and the trust, between the trust and the company, the company and the foundation. I know you've had to develop certain instruments and policies. Yes.
I guess one would say is we have an annual plan of meetings. So and one of the things is that there's always a representation of the foundation in the different entities. What that does is that you are making sure that the foundation always knows what is going on. Because at the end of the day, these organizations are created to serve the foundation. So the other things are that then we have opportunities for the chairpersons of the different entities to meet and talk about any issues. Then we also have an annual retreat in which all the entities meet, so that they are having conversations and able to share on what's going on in the organizations. Now, in terms of how the investments are done, there's an investment policy, so that everybody is aware what are we investing in, what can we not invest in. So there are those kind of tools. Now, all the three entities are all independent, registered as an independent entities. So each of them has its own registration, but in the memorandum and articles of association, in the trust deed, in the shareholders agreement, you can see there's a common thread that runs through. Why were you set up? It is very clear all these institutions have been set up so that they're there to serve the foundation. And I think that is what is really important in terms of tools and policies and structures that really secure the work of the foundation.
And so, as we learned, what is it that really scares you? Is there anything that really scares you or terrifies you? Because from the look of things, you have done it all.
Okay, I think what scares me is would we have a mission drift? And I think that we continue. Maybe one of the structures that ensures that we continue to keep the mission focused is we have an advisory council. So who sits in the advisory council? Okay, the advisory council is not a formal entity, but KCDF has set up the advisory council as the place where people who still want to continue to know what's going in the organization moved into the advisory council, and they actually come to the annual retreat. So these are the likes of Monica Mutuko, the founders, Joyce. So they come to the meeting and they keep asking you the question. No, they keep you focused and reflecting on why were you set up. So I think for me that gives me comfort. But again, I have seen some situations where because of having many entities, it is possible to have a runaway. That is what keeps me awake. And that's why for me it's like we keep reflecting and tightening what could go wrong. And so that is a constant conversation with the directors. And that's why the three entities, all the entities have a meeting and retreat once in a year. Of course, to look at the strategy of the foundation, and then also to look at the progress, and then ask ourselves all these questions about how do we continue to ensure that the structures that are put in place, that the mission, there's no mission drift and all that. So I think that's what I would say. Yeah.
Catherine, thank you so much. I know you and I talked about the possibilities of spending more time with you at CAPSI, where you could become a resource person, especially for our students who are studying on issues of resource mobilization, wealth advisory, among others. So we'll really be following up on that. I also tried to plant a seed with you guys where we could develop a module. I spoke to Janet about it as well, because I really think that you have gone through a process that not many institutions in the continent have done. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful case study that we are using even for our teaching purposes. So thank you so much for what you are doing. So earlier on I said I'm the MZ, but actually I think I should withdraw and say you are the MZ of KCDF.
I mean, happy to share. I think it's there's a lot that people can borrow from our experience, because it's been a long journey. And it's possible. It's possible. So I think we are really happy to be part of this process.
Thank you so much, Catherine.
Thank you.
That was Catherine from KCDF. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the KCDF podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.